You're listening to episode 71 of the Vassals of Kingsgrave, as we return after 2 years to our George R. R. Martin reading group of his earlier works in the Sci-Fi, mainly George-verse, aka Thousand Worlds area, or overall the Martin Sphere. As usual, this is Amin, and I'm joined by two of our reading group.
Hi, I'm Michael, or Mordian on the forums.
And hello, my name is Duncan, also known as Valkyrist on the forums.
Hey guys, it's good to be chatting after what looks like 2 years, I think, in terms of this project.
It is,
right?
yeah. It's been a while.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad we're getting back to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's appropriate that I guess the Super Bowl just happened, because that's the last one we covered was Run the Starlight. Last Super Bowl.
As long as somebody's listening to this in 20 years, they won't even notice any sort of disconnect.
Yeah, exactly. 20 years, it'll be a seamless transition.
This whole discussion will be encased in crystal, so they'll be able to access it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is Nightflyers, which is it's called a novella. It's hard for me to tell what's the difference between a short story. When does it become a novella? It's classified novella from George R. R. Martin, published in 1980, and we're going to have a full discussion on this. Would you call it a short story, or do you call it a novella?
I'm with you. I don't understand the distinction. I don't know. I'm happy to call it a novella. I guess maybe as long as the short stories sometimes seem to be more about an idea, whereas maybe a novella is more. I mean, it's just a narrative. But a short story is often seems like it's about like the author thought of something weird. I don't know. What if we could control dead bodies with our minds or something, right? And so then they're just exploring an idea, and it's more about the idea than the narrative. Whereas this movie is about the narrative. I don't know.
I agree. Short stories are usually a snapshot within a larger story, and they'll sort of use montage and things like that to jump ahead. Whereas this seems more structured. There's a 3-act structure, introducing the characters, introducing conflict. It's much more long form in that way. So I'd call it a novella. And I think just in length, it would slip
length
into
at
the
some
novella
point it becomes a novella. Just it's no longer short. It's a story.
Although I read somewhere that it was originally a short story that he sort of beefed out for a new publication, because the one that the PDF that you sent through was different from the one in Dreamsongs, I think.
Oh, really?
It was much longer. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I read the version that has it's also called Nightflyers, but it has other short stories along with it. The book, the collection is called Nightflyers, then it has Nightflyers plus A Song of Lion and other short stories. But I'm wondering if we're missing anything then.
Well, I don't think so. I think he's just added scenes. So, for example, I started reading the Dreamsongs one, and then I started reading yours, and I realized there was extra stuff, so I jumped to your one. But, for example, in the shorter version, they start on the ship, whereas in the longer one, they actually introduce the characters entering the ship, things like that. So just little things. But the main beats are the same. They just have extra scenes.
Well, why is the Dreamsongs one the shorter one then? That's kind of weird.
Well, I read the Dreamsongs ones, and they come onto the ship at the beginning. They're not on the ship when it starts, in my copy anyway.
Okay. I don't know. Different publication. Maybe, I don't know.
You're saying it's that scene where they're going along this gantry thing or whatever, right?
Yeah, in the shorter version, it just starts with Royd saying everyone's already on the ship, and he's just describing how he watches them. Whereas you have the
that's in your Nightflyer. That's in your Dreamsongs. That's where it starts.
Yeah, it's shorter. Yeah.
I guess they cut it for Australia. You don't have enough paper there or something.
I guess so.
Yeah,
environmentally friendly.
Yeah, I have an electronic version of Dreamsongs, so maybe that's the reason they had extra room.
It seems a waste to me why they wouldn't. I mean, the intro I think is pretty important actually, because just talking broadly about this story, and you kind of mentioned a short story maybe has one thought he wants to focus on. I felt like there is an overarching kind of theme to the whole story, which is kind of dealing with myths and legends and how people can see from the same set of circumstances different explanation. And this applies to the Volcrin. It applies to Eris in there as well. And even that's why I think it's important to start. I mean, the version that you start with, the greater one, starts with Jesus of Nazareth on the cross, right? Is that where it starts?
Yeah, I like that intro.
Yeah, because he fits into that as well, right? Into human mythology or different views of what happened to a character in history.
I think the implication is the idea of the Vulcan represent the unknown, the sort of mystical that things like religion try and explain. But also, I think there's an implication because they're talking about the psi, how whenever the Vulcan get too close to a planet, that everyone on the planet who has psi starts to go sort of insane. And that might be an explanation for all the various religious miracles that the various planets experience. So the Vulcan are sort of moving through the galaxy, generating religious revelations all over the world.
That's interesting because it tries to avoid going near planets too because of it works better. Psi works better in like away from gravity wells, but it does move close as within a year of his agony. I guess a light year of it, or I'm not sure, but or it means it was around that time, within a year of him being there. It was near Earth.
It might also be saying that, I guess, because for Martin growing up in the 50s and the 60s, maybe sci-fi was very cold and clinical and anti-mysticism, whereas maybe Martin is trying to converge the two, say, the mystical and the science fiction can sort of coexist in a way.
Yeah. Although, I mean, they're pretty obvious with it here. They're not saying that this whole... I mean, this is, as I said, this is spoiler-full discussion. We're jumping into it. But the mother's spirit isn't around because of just spirituality. It's because there's a technical reason as well, right? It's the whisper jewel that she kind of like puts her memories and thoughts into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the magic that they have is psi, right? It's not unexplainable. It's just it's it's an advanced neurological function.
Yeah. And it's very rare, but it kind of makes sense in this and in other stories. It's like, I know it's just, I mean, it's all science fiction or fantasy, or whatever, but the explanation within the world is supposed to, I think, is there's millions and millions more people now, and something really rare maybe comes out a little bit more often. Because they talk about it being super recessive and rare, right? When you have like billions of, like trillions, I guess, people potentially, you're more likely to see that come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe different, maybe it sort of lies dormant within the human gene, but the range of new experiences that the intergalactic travel produces maybe brings out a gene that wasn't able to flourish maybe on Earth, something like that.
And they talk about more powerful telepaths and like psychics in other races, right? The Harangans and the soul sucks and stuff, so that might have drawn it out too.
Yeah, and this book the novella does seem to take place in the Thousand Worlds universe because they refer to Avalon and the Whisper Jewels, I think, is in Dying of the Light.
But it's pretty far ahead, I think, like because everything's happened, the Empire's collapsed, but like Avalon kind of has started like a rebirth, I think, because they have the guy Cleronomus who goes on a survey ship. He's kind of like an explorer in the Age of Discovery, kind of like going out and rediscovering things. So I think this is pretty late in his timeline.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
that would be
Dying of Light would
interesting.
be earlier, I think, right? Because it's like they're just kind of like reconnecting to the world's lost space flight.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if there's ever been anything written like a world book on the Thousand Worlds, sort of plotting the timeline of events. So we
should get him started on that. Thanks, Duncan.
Yeah, maybe that would
for. Well, it all comes together though. Winds of Winter, it's gonna like connect. The Vulcan will like come by and fly by the planet.
Well, I have if we have time, I have a crackpot theory about A Song of Ice and Fire and Nightflyers.
Sure. I mean, why don't we just jump into it now?
Or do we want to give our lemon cake ratings and all that?
Sure, let's do that. Yeah, let's get the lemon cakes. Yeah, so out of 5 lemon cakes compared to your usual George short story novella, what would you give it?
I really enjoyed it. This is probably one of, if not my favorite, of the Dream songs so far. I'd probably give it 4.5 floating eyeballs. I thought Royd was a really interesting character. I thought there was a nice tension between whether you weren't quite sure whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, what his intentions were. That helped create a cool paranoia throughout the ship. And I liked how the internal mystery of the ship played off against the external mystery of what the Vulcan were. And I also thought, even though it had a horror story element to it, unlike Martin's other horror stories like Sand Kings or Meathouse Man, where they end on these really just sort of disturbing notes, this one ended on quite a touching human note, which I liked. So I really liked the story.
Yeah, I was a big fan as well. I'd say about 4 lemon cakes probably. This was, I think it's probably my second time reading it, but unlike some other short stories, I had more or less completely forgotten it, and so I kind of got to experience it as though it were the first time, which was nice. Like I found myself falling into all the same like sort of like traps or plot twists that I fell into the first time. Like, I was right along with all the characters, thinking that he's some sort of AI, and then this, that, and the other thing. But anyway, I really liked it. I agreed with everything Duncan said too.
Yeah, I'd give it 4 out of 5 sidekicks. I think it's a pretty good read. I did remember things, so it wasn't a surprise to me, but it was still a solid story, and I think still had that kind of message that he wanted to talk about myths and legends and different interpretations of the same events. So yeah, I enjoyed it. So why don't we, let's kind of like just start from the front and like move forward, talk about things that happen, and then if we get to the point that's relevant to your theory, we can talk about Duncan, or we can. So
it's sort of at the end, like the final couple of lines.
Okay, well then we'll get it to at that point, I think. So
it's not amazing. Okay. it's pretty silly, but
but I like the tie into the Thousand Worlds. We call it Georgeverse, just like more building on the backstory there, and then like what's going on with the different planets and old Poseidon. They're like the genetic masters here. Probably my favorite character in the story is Melantha. She's just a really interesting character, like capable without being arrogant, like confident but not too arrogant. It seems like an interesting person.
Yeah, I liked her too, and she's pretty sort of blithe throughout a lot of the story. But when the sort of danger emerges about a third of the way through, she quickly takes charge. So she has that kind of natural leadership instinct that a lot of the other characters don't. And at various points, the characters are described as sort of second raters, that they were people that no one else really needed, and that's why they were sent on a mission that no one really thought was that important. But whereas Melantha volunteered, so she's obviously got a lot of drive behind her and ambition. And
then at the start, we kind of, they come on the ship, and then Royd he's got eyes and ears everywhere, including the sanitary station, and just like a creeper. And this guy.
Yeah.
I thought it was just him initially, but it seems everybody uses the word, like the verb sext. Like that's just used. If it's one thing you remember from this story is using sext as a verb. Sext G.
I wasn't sure what to make of that. Either they're extremely sort of liberated as a people, or they see sex as this kind of joyless recreational activity thing. Like they don't actually take as much joy out of it. I don't know.
I don't know if they don't take joy in it necessarily, but I think that it's a lot more casual or whatever.
It might be similar to, when they talk about scientists in Antarctica having like snow brides, where they'll just sort of, for human warmth, they'll get together because they're so isolated for so long, they'll sort of just have sex just to feel close to people and feel that, sense of warmth.
But
they had just got on the ship like a week ago, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's just normal behavior, at least in Avalon, maybe.
I would agree. I mean, I think probably pretty much everywhere any of those people came from, like they all seem to rotate partners pretty. I guess maybe not all, maybe not the couple. They didn't, but most people seem to.
Well, the couple had sex with everybody except for themselves. Like
they did. Okay, all right. So
the couple felt like late in the story.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, sorry.
But I mean, I think there must be planets that are still more conservative, like the space Dothraki planet or whatever. But the ones that are the source planets for these people are all modern, like liberal, like, and then ahead of that even more, right? It's become basically, it's lost it's just pure casual to them. But it's just funny because I don't remember seeing that kind of the sex elsewhere in Martin's works. Like he doesn't really use in other Thousand World stories. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other stories where there's a lot of characters. Usually it's only a smaller cast, 1 or 2 people, or it's just one character kind of going insane.
Well, the telepath who has sex with like the lesser telepath, and they talk about the connection. That's kind of like Rob and Maya too. That's when they'll be closest.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I haven't actually read that one yet.
Oh. But you haven't read a Song for Laya?
No, I've got to read it. I haven't. Yeah, I'm slowly making my way through.
Then you got to listen to our discussion of it afterwards. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I will.
That's one of the best. In terms, and actually, I was going to send you guys a link here where I think it's from Martin's site. I don't know if it's meant to be public yet. It's just a list of his awards that he won, because these are the stories that he built up a lot of awards for, and he actually won a Japanese award for Nightflyers. It was the best foreign translated work. It's like the Japanese Hugo.
It's strange to think that this is what he was famous for. He was a famous sci-fi author before the 90s, and then he became a famous fantasy author. And there was a movie adaptation made of it, and I watched the trailer, and it's funny because it was made in like 1987, and it ends with, "From the famous sci-fi mind of George R. R. Martin."
Yes. And there are people that have been fans of him since then, just from his sci-fi work. But I mean, did either of you see the movie then, or just the trailer? I haven't seen.
No,
it
I just saw the trailer.
I heard it's garbage, so I didn't bother to.
No, yeah, I didn't.
It looks garbage, yeah.
I mean, it's. You think Martin would have like? I mean, he's had such a variety of success, or he would have been burned out by Hollywood. I mean, he went to work for Hollywood around that time as well. But it's like this is such a horrible adaptation, and Game of Thrones, for the trouble that we give it, is still a decent adaptation.
It's also interesting that you could make a career as like a short fiction writer for so long. I mean, that was his bread and butter. I mean, he wrote some novels in that time as well, but most of his work is short fiction, it seems, and he's just publishing in magazines and sci-fi zines and things.
But he was still working part-time for other jobs, though, so really he couldn't just do that. Like,
oh, okay, right, because he was doing Beauty and the Beast and doctoring things.
But to do part-time and yet like write such good works too, to have the time to write such good work. I mean, I think it would be even more difficult now to do what you could do back then.
It did strike me reading this, though. It did seem to have possibly a screenplay in mind, just the way it cuts between various viewpoints as the action unfolds. It did seem like it was, I don't know, so it had that cinematic vibe to it, where there was a cast of characters. It was jumping between. It did have that a more structured, a sort of 3-act structure compared to his other short fiction.
What also was interesting, I mean, this is 1980, although maybe it was, who knows when it was written, maybe a couple of years earlier. Like a lot of his earlier 70s works, and I think Michael, you may remember from our discussion, it seems like he doesn't quite get automation as much. Like he has like the corpses, and he has like he didn't have.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But yet by this time he's got it. Like I don't know if computers were more prevalent in the last couple of years between those points that he could be like, yeah, something can be fully automated. It doesn't need.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that before, but there is sort of like a weird like and then the other things too. Like I'm trying to think like the computer in the last Super Bowl, right? Like the football simulation and stuff like that, where it does seem like he's just sort of like that doesn't really seem like the way computers work to me, but okay.
It's like a kind of loneliness as well. Like they needed to have the guy there.
The guy there for some reason, yeah. Whereas, but this, you're right. Like it does. I mean, I guess it feels seamless, right? It doesn't strike me as odd in any particular way.
They do mention tapes at some point. I think it's like we backed up on paper and tapes.
Yeah. But then they also have sentient crystal or whatever.
Yes. So I think, but it's only a couple of years difference between writing them. But I mean, the world was also maybe like just the way computers were developing at that time. It was easier for Martin to view things as automated. A couple of years later in writing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. And then again, by telling the story of the Vulcan, it tells more what's going on. Like I don't think we've ever really probably talked about like the history of what happened in Thousand Worlds. Like, we know that there was a 1,000-year war with the Harangans, but I think they were also kind of conflicting with the people on the other side as well. Either I think it says here, Harangans were on one side, and then there was like this other race that was on the other side. Not the Nortalush, it's the other, like the F something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The Fendi. I think they were also fighting with the Fendi too. And I mean, the humans won, but it kind of just the Empire kind of collapsed from the strain of that conflict.
Yeah.
But the Fendi are in the inner core of the galaxy. That's where the Vulcan came from, and it would be flying by, and everyone had their own legends about the Vulcan. Which, by the way, I'm going to send you a link of some people's imaginations or like drawings of Vulcan, because I think we probably all have like a different view in our heads. Like this is not what I imagined when I saw Vulcan. Like I see it's basically a giant space plant in my mind, right? That's the level of consciousness it kind of has.
Yeah, I mean maybe a little bit more than a plant or something, but not a ton at least. Most of these are pictures of butterfly, which admittedly was not what I imagined.
There's like this monster in H.P. Lovecraft that's this giant floating cloud in space, and the cloud's basically just all these screaming mouths. That was kind of what I was thinking of.
Well, you're right. I think one of you guys mentioned like kind of like the religious inspiration of the Vulcan, because like, people have seen them as God's messengers or a warning about something coming. It's like opposite different views. The stories contradict themselves with a different interpretation. Oh, and then it's talking about, here we go, we get to Melantha. It's like, by the third week she had sex with all 4 of the men and at least 2 of the other women.
Yeah. Some of these Nightflyer things I feel like are not related to the to the short story, like
yeah.
the guy standing next to the dragon or whatever. Like I think that's got to be.
I think
Are they
this is just the tag Nightflyers, so it could be
Yeah,
another
exactly.
story or something. There's I thought that there would have been more, to be honest. I mean, the cover is pretty nice, like the one on the anthology.
I don't think I know that one.
Let's see if I have. Just search Nightflyers, it'll come up. You search Nightflyers and just go to images.
Okay.
It's like big.
Yeah, I've just got like sort of a cracked window and a swirling blue puddle. I don't see any monsters. Oh, there's like 2 blue skulls flying. I don't know. Oh, the Volcran Technicolor. Okay, yeah, it's sort of like a squid thing, like all these beams of light.
Yeah.
Spewing forth from like a black hole. Yeah, that could be interesting.
The story's kind of very, as you said, it can trick you a little bit. Like, it keeps talking about different theories. They're saying, oh, Royd might be a computer, and then it's like he watched Unsmiling, and then it's like this, and he frowned. Like, it's giving you hints from his reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get a sense that he's disembodied, because it does describe, even early in the story, his little, like, sort of organic movements of his face and his fingers and things. Yeah. Originally, I was sort of thinking, is Royd the ship itself? Because just the way it didn't feel like there was an individual POV, because it was jumping between various characters, not only the characters but also their thoughts. And I was wondering, is the whole ship meant to be the point of view? Is Royd the whole ship? But I guess you could argue that maybe it's like the mother's point of view, because it doesn't because it jumps between people's thoughts throughout the story. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mothership's point of view. It could just be like a POV jump, like A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, I think we'd get a lens of disdain probably if it were the mother's POV.
Yeah.
I think everything.
You could argue we get a vague disdain.
I suppose. A little bit. We certainly, I mean, some of the characters are certainly not described in a flattering way, but,
No.
Yeah, well, they have that theory early on if he was AI or something. It's not quite there, but...
Although it is interesting that none of the characters are like... Well, to me at least, it didn't seem like any of the characters were outright evil, because I was expecting a kind of thing where they'd basically just go insane and start butchering each other and that. But even like the worst guy, the guy who was most suspicious when he sort of breaks back onto the ship, his worst thought is, oh, we have to get the ship back and would have a trial and figure out what happened. Like that's the worst of it. Basically, there wasn't that kind of that sort of manslaughter that I was expecting, where everyone goes crazy.
Yeah. Well, there's a way to boost psionic receptivity by using the Esperon. So they use that. Royd is warning them not to do that, and then Lami Thorn, the one, like the level 1 Telfat, his head explodes.
Yeah, that was good. That made me sit up and pay attention again. Yeah. It's like a good exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Did anyone else get like a Ridley Scott Alien vibe from that, like with the chest burster scene in the dining room?
Yeah, I guess.
I was sort of thinking it's sort of the whole story felt. I guess it would have been written around the same time, or maybe a little bit earlier, because Alien was 1979. But the idea of the spaceship as like a haunted house. Some sinister force picking off the characters one by one, the head explosion scene. I don't know, it just got the claustrophobia of the spaceship as like a haunted place made me think of Alien.
Was Alien before this or was after then?
I think it was like the same time, so there must have been something in the air and like the sci-fi community. But
I think Alien was just before. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think this might have been 19. Well, I think it was published 1980, and Alien was out 1979, but he might have been working on it before.
Yeah, who knows?
That's right. It could be. So that was kind of the thought, yeah. Okay, let's see what else I have. Valantha says, don't any of you love a mystery? Because that's the thing, it's a mystery about Royd as well. What's going on there? And then Royd's like, I'd like to guess about the gas giants. They did, because somebody thought he was from like the gas giant planet.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think his strategy of secrecy is necessarily the best. I mean, like, obviously he can't tell them about his mother or whatever, but like, I don't know. I feel like there are other things he could do, but I suppose he's not well socialized exactly, so
Yeah.
maybe they don't occur to him.
Well, it seems if anyone's, I mean, the mother is obviously a bad character, but like anyone else who's a bad character, even Royd is, because he's basically risking people's lives every time he takes somebody on there, and people have died before from this, and he almost treats he's become like it doesn't matter to him anymore. He's so cold about it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, he does seem to. Another thing I was thinking about was that he doesn't seem to have he has systems automated, but he doesn't seem to have any sort of, I don't know. I mean, something like a robotic arms or something in the habitat area. He has no way of physically interacting with the people there. He can open and close doors and things like that. But if they're doing something problematic, he can't physically stop them. Which
that was that was one question I had. How did he keep serving them dinner? It said when they arrived on the ship, there was a meal laid out for them, and I don't know how. Was there little robotic arms?
Yeah,
preparing those for him.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah,
because he doesn't seem to have any way of when they're about to administer the injection or whatever. He doesn't seem to have any way of trying to stop that. I don't know.
Maybe he has arms. They're just little tiny ones that can do anything.
Yeah, could be.
They wouldn't be effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. He probably must have some sort of automated control, but
yeah, there's no little robot butler or anything.
Yeah. Well, and then I found it interesting when the guy's head exploded, and it was the male linguist, the one that was screaming, and then his partner, the female one, slapped him. I think that was kind of maybe George reversing what you might be the kind of expectation or something, where it's the woman would be screaming. It was the male,
right?
The one that was screaming, and then gets slapped back to calm down.
The Melantha that takes charge, whereas the supposed commander of the ship, whose name is what's his name? Caroli?
Caroli,
the academic.
Caroli,
He's sort of sitting stunned and indecisive when the ship.
And then there's to the end of the story that the bits of blood and skull still there, in that room. It's just floating around. They didn't properly clean it out. Well, I guess they do it at the very end of the story, but
yeah.
Okay, and then there's talk of Githyanni's soul socks, Harangan mine. For a second, they're oh, is it Harangan mine? It's no, they never communicated with them.
It was also such a weird, insane guess, right? Oh, if it's a Harangan mine, then we can plot and come up with something to do. And it's well, I mean, based on admittedly the very limited amount of information I have, it sounds like if it's a Harangan mine, you're all just fucked. Right? If you decide it's a Harangan mine, then you're done and you lost. Move on.
Yep. Sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Maybe can be used to criticize people with the crazy conspiracy theories in Ice and Fire. It's it's of that level, right? All these different crazy theories.
Yes, the lack of answer creates this vacuum that people need to fill with their paranoia and their anxiety.
Okay, and then we get to the kind of later on where things start to go bad, and Royd is talking to Melantha, and he's explained that he's been watching her. And then he says nothing, and then she's like, "Okay, I would probably have sex with you too, Royd." He's like, "How do you know what I'm thinking?" but he's actually he's concerned about her being telepathic, because that's will draw Mother will be drawn to that. Yeah, if Mother thinks of a threat, then she interacts. But it seems she's willing to tolerate some people on them if they're not, they're just being moved from one place to another and they're not a threat.
Yeah, it was bringing the telepath on that seemed to upset that balance, because he could sense it and seemed to push against it and rattled everyone else, and maybe that general sort of paranoia got to her. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's this danger that actually makes the linguists get back together. It's this. Otherwise, they were always criticizing each other and had a bad relationship.
Yeah.
It was hard to keep track of some what everyone was doing, xenotech versus cyberneticist. It was a bit.
Yeah,
tricky.
I just kind of focused on the main three and just let the other people just be this general mob of confusion and ineptitude.
Do not try to have a hookup chart. It's just confusing to see who hook up.
No.
Yeah.
With all the pins in it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so then what keeps happening is people keep trying to like figure out what's going on, and Roy warns them, don't do that, and they still do it. They go hook up to the computer, and then they get like sucked into space or something. Like the door gets opened by the Nightflyers,
Yeah.
the mother, because they're getting close to figuring it out. And then when Christopherus is kind of like getting crazy, and he's like, "Oh, Roy's trying to kill us," and he's like, "Maybe he's a harangue in mind or avenging angel of the Volcran or the second coming of Jesus Christ." Like I think that again that's irrelevant that it mentions Christ again.
Does he say that in relation to he's going to kill us all? Does that suggest that the Christianity has become this feared religion?
I don't know,
but
it's been. I was trying to calculate how long. I mean, I think it's at least 5,000 years since Christ. More than that. Like this is thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. Right? So
yeah.
Like whatever story there is being changed so much at that point, at least in this, the way that's going in this, because they don't know where Earth is now. That's the other thing, right?
Have you guys read The Way of Cross and Dragon?
I have.
Is this the same?
Not for a long time, yeah.
Is it the same universe? Because in that one, like Christianity exists in the sci-fi setting, but it.
I mean, as far as I recall, I feel like Cross and Dragon is the Thousand Worlds. But
yeah, I feel it would fit into that. Yes, but I need to read. That's one we could cover actually, because we're running out of short. I want to cover short stories still. The longer ones just take too long to prep for these kind of things at this point. So yeah, it's worth going into.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. But I just brought it up because religion still plays a fairly like powerful role in the galaxy at that point. I guess it depends on how that may be 1,000 years in the past compared to this one.
Well, I was just trying to see. I'm pretty sure somewhere they say like Earth. They don't know where Earth is. It's like a mythical place.
Yeah, I love
lost
that.
Contact.
It's like the Garden of Eden. Like they've lost. They no longer know where it is, or something like that.
Yeah,
or Atlantis maybe would be a better analogy.
Yeah. I guess, yeah.
What's really interesting is right before George went on to write A Game of Thrones, he was working on a novel called Avalon, which is maybe like he was going to push forward with the story. It'll be like the kind of the culmination, because Avalon seems to be really important, right? It's a very technological place, kind of the rebirth of the empires from there. There's going to be another empire.
Yeah, I read that. Like that was his next major novel when he came up with he was struggling with it, like he was having a hard time, and he came up. We had the dream about the wolves in the snow, and that he shifted gears with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, when is Avalon coming out? I'm waiting for Avalon to come out.
You'll be waiting a while.
You sweet summer child. I've been waiting since like 1990 for Avalon.
Yeah, exactly. All
Where's
the sci-fi
spoiler chapter? I want spoiler chapters of Avalon.
This diversion into fantasy.
Yeah.
When is he going to get back to the real work?
Can you put out spoiler chapters of Avalon? There must be something. I think he had a couple 100 pages written or something at least. Release them.
Yeah, that probably definitely is on DOS floppy disk somewhere.
Yeah. If it is, probably corroded by now. That's not good.
Yeah.
Unless he's got it like in storage and like in cold storage, it hasn't been faced the elements.
Maybe it's on a crystal or something.
It's on tape.
It's on a whisper chip.
It's on tape. Tape drive. Okay, let's see here. So this is where we find out about gravity and how it actually, because his mother had telekinesis powers. It works better in the weightlessness than under the gravity net. So once they shut off the gravity, she's able to kill Christopherus and the rest of them that went in.
He has a good line where he's saying, like, without gravity, up and down sort of have no meaning. And it shows the way that a lot of the human characters frame their view of the world in terms of geography and things like that, whereas Roy doesn't, because he just kind of exists in the vacuum of space. He doesn't, land, I guess, isn't as important to him. He can just kind of float through the air, and up, down, left, right don't really have as much meaning. Yeah,
so and then it turns out it's not just her memories being implanted, but it's the fact that her psi abilities are also preserved as well that makes her the great danger she is in that giant crystal.
And possibly amplified by technology.
It does make it stronger. Yeah. And the whole story of the mother is that she was on one of those, if she had been on Avalon, she would have been fine. She would have been even revered and given probably a full scholarship or whatever to Sci school, but because she was in one of those backward planets that sought differently. She was tortured and brainwashed, and drugged, and is still that affected her whole view of life.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, certainly.
Yeah. So she ends up getting her own new home. Also seems to be quite advanced in terms of building ships. She gets this ship built there, and it's all automated. She can handle it herself. She can get rid of her crew. Doesn't need a crew anymore. Yeah, so that's basically becomes the struggle. It's like they have to survive against the ship, so Roy can get laid. That's the. He's like, if I get laid, it's okay. I'm gonna die. Go down. Go down before I go down. Oh, and so at the same time though, they get closer to the Volcran, which is de Brannon's obsession, and he gets on. Let's go on to the Volcran because he ends up kind of like left behind to see them, and then they find out, oh, it's not actually. They're not sentient. It's just like an animal.
Yeah, I love like I guess you don't really get a description necessarily, but just the sense of its sort of massiveness in the vastness of space. There's this like almost something frightening and almost romantic about it, just like a massive whale moving through the ocean. It's scary, but it's like sort of that sense of childlike awe. It's cool.
Yeah.
And the lack of consciousness. It's a form of life or a form of consciousness that humans can't sort of comprehend. And I like the descriptions where they're describing how these entities could be missed because humans are only going from planet to planet or planets that could possibly support life in their minds. But all these dark spaces in between are just kind of ignored. So there's this whole potentially ecosystem of consciousness that just doesn't fit into the human's idea of life. So it's just been ignored.
Yeah, but that being said, it's still even though it's different because they talk about that. Maybe they can't read it, but it's still, at least from what they see, it seems it's not actually like beyond a I live, kind of like the Grishka. It doesn't have anything more than that. It's just consuming and moving outwards.
Or rather, that its thought process are sort of so slow that they have to be observed for maybe years before they can.
That's possible.
Sort of
it could
together.
be in that sense. Yeah. Think about.
Yeah, you have to.
Tough Voyaging, there's one time when they meet these guys, I won't go into details, but they meet these things that they don't think are sentient, but actually are. They're just so different.
Yeah, or like, myths about humans walking across a mountain that after a while they realize it's moved an inch and it's actually like a giant or something like that. Like that humans are thinking so fast that these lumbering creatures that are so big they can't even see the borders of the creature are actually not part of the landscape. They're actual, living things.
Yeah, it's like there's some like famous old stories, right, about like cities built on the back of like a giant tortoise or whatever that submerges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the giant tortoise in space. Yeah, that's possibly an inspiration.
Yeah, or the lion turtle in Avatar. So.
Oh, the lion turtle, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's moving with telekinesis. It's just pulsing and has the beautiful lights, and it's just like converting the particles to energy, and just it's been moving. Like, I don't know if this is how long they live. It's just these entities have lived since the whole time, or if they've been like mating in space and producing new ones. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the sense that it's just it uses so little energy rather that it can just live for eons and eons.
That's why I viewed it more like a plant, because those are like a tree or something is the longest. It's way longer living than an animal.
Yeah.
So I see
definitely.
like kind of like a Venus trap type, like a plant that just it's converting the energy particles there instead of solar light. Okay, so then everyone felt the Volcran in their dreams because of the telekinesis there, but they say it's mindless, it's moving across, avoiding gravity wells. That's it for the Volcran. So I guess is Debrani like does the Volcran actually like just like suck him in, or did he just die out there? Just it's kind of hard to tell, right? It just kind of.
Well, I guess it's half and half. It's sucking him in, but he's also going towards it because he's it's sort of the focal point of his obsession. So he's willing to die just to learn the truth.
Right.
I don't know. Is the implication that he gets absorbed into its consciousness, kind of thing? Like maybe the Volcran is just it absorbs all those curious enough to venture into it.
It's the Nexus. I don't know if you've seen the Next Generation, the movie.
I haven't seen it.
And then
Sorry.
it says he sees a vision. It doesn't have a mouth or eyes or nose, but it has a face and you can see him. Oh, and then Agatha's dead. There's blood on her face. But did her like head just explode as well from just being so close to the pounding sigh or what?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the way I took it. Yeah.
Yeah.
She already had a head. It's just such a like. It's just like a giant like. It's just so. If your head is on that wave frame or whatever for Psy, it just gets blasted by the huge. Because it must be huge to propel that thing, right? So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess maybe she can pick up certain thought frequencies, and this frequency is so loud that it shatters her mind like a glass.
Yeah. Okay, so then back to the main story. There's this whole struggle with Roy trying to get there and back in time. He makes it, but then his mother outwits him by turning up the gravity, which means he can do nothing because he's already weak in regular gravity, can barely move. So he dies, but then he imprints himself on the crystal at the same time because Melantha informs him that he also has psi abilities, being the cross-sex clone of his mother.
The other movie that I thought of was Hitchcock's Psycho, because that's all about the mother figure sort of controlling his life. Like spoilers, but the mother's dead by the beginning of the movie, but he treats her as though she's alive, and he can hear her voices and her voice, and she's telling him to do things. She controls his actions, and I guess his sort of desires, because the female character in Psycho is this sort of, he becomes obsessed with her. He watches her through spy holes, similar to the way Roy sort of spies on his characters. So it's got this weird voyeurism.
Is still on him, maybe. Like, I mean, she's actually dead in that movie or whatever, but like what she did is still affecting what he does. Like, yeah,
and the fact that he was bred to be her lover introduces this sort of weird Oedipus complex, and there's voyeurism, and there's this fear of dirt and filth, and everything must be clinically clean, which has like sort of Freudian overtones to it.
Yeah, and then but she ends up dying though, right? And then he's kind of raised from the tube.
It's sort of it. I guess you could say there's a theme in a lot of Martin's science fiction in terms of the lonely figure. Like space becomes this metaphor for just the vast loneliness or social isolation, things like that. Like what's the one where the guy's in the outpost? I can't remember the title.
Second kind of loneliness.
Second kind of
loneliness. Or it's he's so far away because he can't. There's a great line in that. Like there's like a beautiful romantic loneliness to being in space, but it's just as lonely being in the middle of at a party with no one to talk to.
Well, that's the two types. Right? The first is the tragic, but yet like epic type, and the second is just like you just
choose the epic romantic loneliness. Exactly. Can't go back to that. But here he was actually raised in loneliness and social isolation. But like I said before, there's almost like a hopefulness where he's trying to connect with people. I mean, ultimately, he sort of puts people's lives at risk, so it's not entirely altruistic.
Yeah.
But he's completely socially isolated, but he's actually trying to connect with people. And I guess he does in the end, which makes it a sort of happy ending.
Yeah, he couldn't get rid of his mother. He was trying to get her wiped from the system, and she just would keep coming back or wouldn't be wiped properly. But he does the opposite of what his mother was hoping to program him to. He actually wants to see people have contact with him.
Yeah, he rises above his sort of DNA or his neuroses.
And that's what happens at the end. So like Melantha is there with him, and they've been following the Volcran for years, documenting it and studying it. But they can't go to like hyperdrive or whatever. They can't go into star drive because it's damaged until it's repaired. But they're worried about that, or like Melantha's worried about that, right? Because the mother is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I guess this battle of wills, one AI. So it's a computer with two AIs occupying, and they're sort of wrestling with each other.
He's getting better at it too, but she's still there. And it also is kind of interesting is the Vulcan's about to go into Temper's Veil. They're saying there's a lot more energy there or something. So that maybe it'll evolve or be able to make more use of that.
I guess it's like an AI with multiple personality disorder. I don't know if that's been used before in sci-fi, but that's kind of an interesting idea. That a computer itself could develop kind of neuroses and be at war with itself the way humans are.
But they're both active at this. Yeah, multiple personalities, and one is on, and the other one's off completely. Like they're kind of struggling here.
Yeah, I guess so. it's a mix of the two. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes one is more dominant than the other.
Well, here they're trying to the mother joins and they're trying to just move the ship. They're messing with kind of copying the Volcran. So tell her move and she'll even join in on that.
Yeah.
But that's it. They're together now. She's not going to leave him, and eventually they're going to send the ship back to convey the data they've collected. So I guess that was kind of, as you said, it's kind of a touching scene. But I don't know. It seems like really Melantha was willing to commit to this. That really left an impression on her then in that short amount of time to do this.
Yeah, and the final line is something like, "I'll never leave him alone again," which I wasn't entirely sure what to make of. I guess leave him alone with his mother. You know, if I leave, then the mother will take over. He won't have hope of sort of regaining his humanity or whatever. But yeah, it was a good ending.
So what was your theory tying into Ice and Fire?
Okay, so my theory was, all right, the Nightflyer crashes into Westeros, basically. And then, so the mother AI hates nature, but because the spaceship is crashed, she can't escape. So she's sort of tormented by nature and dirt and filth and all that of the forest. So the next best thing she can do is kill nature. So she decides to freeze everything. And Roy doesn't want to do that. Like, he's at war with her. So he escapes, his AI escapes into nature, into the trees, and he becomes the three-eyed raven or some version of the old gods or something. And he uses he was spying on everyone on the ship, he uses the tree network to spy on everything. And then and the mother AI is able to reanimate corpses. She's animating the whites. So it's like the story is like a sort of mother versus son for the soul,
she's the
soul
one
of Westeros.
Moving
and
she's the one moving everything?
She's reanimating the corpses, or her magic is sort of spreading across the land through winter or something like that. Just the idea of the reanimated corpses is obviously something that pops up again in the Song of Ice and Fire, and the idea of the surveillance, the 1,000 Eyes in One, just made me thought of Royd.
Yeah, I like her. I guess they're in the same crystal, which is maybe too bad. But if their crystals were somehow separated, it'd be in the crash, hers is in some sort of giant piece of frozen in the center of some huge piece of ice, right? And she's the great other, right? And he's his crystal goes into an ancient weirwood or something, and he manages to connect all the other weirwoods.
Yeah.
I like it.
So
it's nice.
Or he falls into a volcano and becomes from lore.
Right. Either way, yeah.
or I don't know if the crystal was it split in two, and that was what was Dawn was carved out of something like that. It's the basis of Dawn.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I think
or the dragon fire or something.
What you're touching upon more seriously, leaving the crazy theory aside, is
what?
But I think you're on something. I think what it comes at is more the concepts are reused in Ice and Fire. Not the same characters, but the concepts of this kind of you said Bloodraven, right? He's kind of similar to Roy in a way, kind of distance and maybe telepathic type powers or whatever, isolated.
Yeah.
That concept, Martin draws upon concepts he's worked out before, even names he's worked out before again in Ice and Fire. So I think he's taken from this and put it into there. For actually directly going from this to that is unlikely. He hasn't done it. Now he could. In general, he could make that world be in the Thousand Worlds. He could do that, but he hasn't done the Asimov thing to actually tie them together. He's just reused the ideas.
Well, I think that's part of the fun of reading his short fiction. He's wrestling with a lot of these ideas that he would later implement and develop in A Song of Ice and Fire, or other things.
Which makes me want to think that because we kind of talked about the Loneliness trilogy of A Song for Laia, a second kind of Loneliness, and Meat House Man. Those were tied to more thoughts and things he had then, but maybe we should keep in mind in terms of Loneliness and Ice and Fire, we should keep an eye out to see how it's dealt with. The concept of loneliness in Ice and Fire, although those are things that he was dealing with in his youth. Maybe he's not thinking about them as much now.
It certainly doesn't. Just going from his writing or whatever, it doesn't seem like he dwells on them the way he did.
No, you're right. He doesn't even want to read them so much. They're more at that point in his life, they were more relevant. But other concepts like this kind of psi powers or the isolated powerful being or something could be relevant. but more
Yeah.
using an idea rather than this person actually like Mother from Nightflyers is an Isofar actually showing up. I think that's too much.
Riding the ice dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely in his early work. There's such a sense of sort of wounded loneliness in a lot of it. Some of it's romantic, some of it's just this really anxious kind of pained loneliness.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion Lannister has that issue as well, right?
Well, I don't know if it's it's sort of a different loneliness. It's a loneliness of sort of being trapped in circumstances where there's lots of people around, but you can't necessarily talk to them because everyone's kind of conspiring against you. So someone like Sansa is often engaged, talking with lots of people, but she can never really show her true self kind of thing. So it's sort of a different variation of it. So A Song of Ice and Fire, it's more, a lot of the characters are more sort of trapped in circumstances or held captive or cut off from where they want to be. But it's not. It's sort of a different loneliness than his earlier fiction, where it's very sort of raw psychological. It feels there's almost like a biographic sense to it. Whereas A Song of Ice and Fire, it feels like characters. It's not. It's more to the characters' circumstances.
Okay, so we talked about Nightflyers. We talked about the movie. Yeah, I guess we can wrap up. Maybe have our after show game. I'm not sure if we want to do that, but we can after. Anything else in the main episode you want to chat about?
No, I don't think. I think that's everything I had to say. Oh, I love the floating eyeball. Thought that was super creepy.
Yeah, it was cool. That's a nice visual detail.
There's the one eyeball out of the 1,000 hyacinths.
Yeah, that's right.
She almost like she needed that eyeball to see properly there or something, like because it was like guiding the laser. It's kind of interesting. Like,
to get like a really precise sort of maybe.
Yeah, when he described it, I just got such a vivid image of it, just floating, just kind of, just floating above the character's head, just like staring, nonchalantly at it.
Yeah, I think he did a good job, sort of painting a picture in all of like the combat and even like the scene where they were getting sucked out in the airlock and stuff like that. I think he did a good job painting. It
was, and I thought that the exposition was well encased in dialogue, because that's one of the criticisms I have of Martin in some of his stories, that he sort of does these huge info dumps that aren't necessarily compelling. Like I struggled with Dying of the Light for that reason, whereas here it's encoded quite well into the character's motivation, so that the main researcher or the main academic is really passionate about this stuff, so he delivers it, but it's compelling because he's passionate about it.
In terms of adaptations, because this had an adaptation, we reviewed Sand Kings, we talked about it, and how I didn't really like the Outer Limits adaptation because I thought it strayed too much from what they already had a good story there. They didn't need to change it so much. But I think the reason why maybe it was like that is because I was looking. It was the first episode of the newer Outer Limits, and they probably had less flexibility, like with a new show to, like they had to change. Like it would have been better if the Sand Kings was in like season 4 or 5 of Outer Limits, where maybe they could have done just a direct analogy, like a direct transfer over. But when they did it in season 1, episode 1, they had to put it on Earth and convert it. So he was unlucky, I think, to have his work being the first one there. I think it would have been a better adaptation if it was later in the Outer Limits. As
in, they didn't want to go too weird.
They didn't want to go too weird in episode 1. They were willing to go weird later. They were willing to have like completely different planets, different stuff going on. But I think in season 1, in the first few episodes, they wanted to mostly be on Earth or tied to Earth. So they had to convert it over to the different story. Whereas I think it was ready to go just as a complete adaptation on its own. They could have easily done a 1-hour show on it. Just some planet. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks guys for joining me for Nightflyers chat. That was fun.
That was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was good.
Yeah, and check us Vassals of Kingsgrave at vassalskingsgrave.wordpress.com or on via podcastadvicefire.com, and we're on Twitter and Facebook. And hopefully we'll be back to continuing our George R.R. Martin earlier works thing. It all started almost 4 years ago with you were there, Michael. Actually, it was you and Vic where we did our first episode.
I was gonna say I'm not. I could be wrong. I'm not sure I've missed one so far.
Oh, good.
I think I might have been on all of them. I'm not 100%.
You've been seeing and watching everything from your chair.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've actually met you in person, so I could vouch for you. I've never met Duncan, so we don't know what he's up to over there. Apparently, his works are different length or something. That's kind of fishy.
It could be a disembodied,
anyone out there can vouch for Duncan, let us know.
Yeah.
He's managed to work himself into a VOK curator position. Never.
No one quite remembers when he showed up.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if any of the listeners have any, well, I guess it's up to you. I mean, but if anyone has any recommendations on what we should cover, maybe let us know in the comments.
I'll be open to that. I think the main point is we're still kind of lacking the time. Like, we were going to do Dying the Light. That kind of led to the dying of this podcast series. Like we just couldn't.
Yeah. Anytime it gets mentioned, it's sort of like, oh right, yeah, soon.
It was just too long read it to cover it. I mean, I've read it as well. I just haven't reread it for this, and it's just like,
yeah,
it's too much of a commitment for what this is. We've always just been doing short stories into novellas, and that's like basically a novel. So, yeah.
I was surprised though, because there's actually quite a few short stories that aren't in Dreamsongs that keep popping up.
That's right.
That I see online. So yeah, if anyone can, I don't know where you get them. That's the problem, I guess. Maybe libraries.
Oh, we have review copies, so we're good. But there's Meat House Man, which we covered, but I don't think we covered the earlier zombie ones. We could kind of complete that. There's two earlier. There's New Pittsburgh was actually a pretty short one, and there's like the Overdrive one. So maybe we should round that off.
Yeah, I was re-listening to our Meat House Man episode, and you and Lee maybe were talking about the other ones, and I was like, oh, I didn't even realize there were other ones.
Yeah, too bad we missed Halloween. That would have been a good time to talk about that. But hey, we can. That's something that could fit in. The Crossing and Dragon that could fit in. We should try to get this going. Even there's something sooner than the yearly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.